Have you ever looked into a man's eyes and sensed he was hiding more than he said? That behind the silence and cold demeanor lay an internal battlefield between the pride that dominates him and the desire he tries to repress. Carl Jung said the masculine unconscious is shaped by shadows he himself doesn't understand, and one of those shadows is the ego. The male ego is fragile, even if it pretends to be strong. It defends itself, protects itself, withdraws. But what few women know is that when you learn to touch the exact point where that ego bleeds, something changes. The armor cracks, and it is there that love infiltrates like light in a dark room. To wound a man's ego doesn't mean destroying it. It means awakening it, shaking the structures he built to avoid feeling. Jung called this the confrontation with the shadow self. The moment a man faces a woman who doesn't beg, doesn't humiliate herself, and doesn't accept halves, the woman who awakens this pain is the same one who ignites the most overwhelming desire because she touches his deepest instinct, conquest. But this time, he isn't the one choosing. She sets the rules, and he, without knowing why, agrees to play. Maybe you're tired of chasing, being ignored, giving without receiving. Maybe you're trying to understand why he pulls away when you surrender. But what you haven't noticed yet is that the game has shifted in favor of the woman who understands the psychic nature of men. When you act consciously, embodying the woman who knows the value of her silence, her time, her absence, you don't just bruise his ego, you make it bleed from within, craving your presence like air underwater. He doesn't know it yet, but he's already trapped. Carl Jung explained that true love arises when the masculine unconscious encounters something that both challenges and fascinates it. You become the archetypal image of the unattainable woman, the goddess he wants to worship and dominate but cannot comprehend. This mystery, this uncertainty, are the very poisons that intoxicate his ego. And what is the ego if not the enemy of surrender? When the ego loses, love wins. And when he realizes he's lost emotional control, he's already completely surrendered to you. In this video, you'll learn how to wound his ego in the most strategic and intense way. Without hate, screams, or childish games, you'll discover how to wield the power of absence, self-worth, and silence as refined psychological weapons. You'll dive into the depths of the masculine psyche through Carl Jung's lens and realize that the path to being madly loved isn't about pleasing, it's about confronting. It's not about molding yourself, it's about elevating yourself. And when you do this correctly, he'll love you with the intensity of someone who finally found the woman who deconstructed him and thus liberated him. Losing a man's admiration might seem like failure, but for Jung, this is precisely where transformation begins. A man can only love deeply when faced with a woman who refuses to feed his fragile ego with false validations. When you abandon the predictable role of giving everything on a silver platter, his ego collapses. In that void he doesn't know how to fill, pain emerges. Silent, confusing pain. And it's precisely there that desire begins to bloom. This confrontation is what Jung called the encounter with the shadow, the denied, hidden part, the unresolved wound a man carries. When you withdraw your energy, your gaze, your devotion, his ego loses its primary source of nourishment, admiration. This absence becomes a mirror, showing him what truly exists when you're no longer there. The image he sees isn't pretty, it's lacking, insecure, disoriented, but it's real. And reality, however painful, is the only starting point for true emotional transformation. By strategically distancing yourself, you activate an intense psychic process. He begins to idealize you. Absence fills voids with desire. The ego can't stand losing territory, and by stepping back, you claim the emotional space that was once solely his. The paradox sets in. The more you withdraw, the more he approaches. Jung said the unconscious seeks completion, and what escapes rational control becomes obsession. You cease to be an option and transform into an enigma. In this scenario, you're no longer just the woman who was once by his side. You're the symbolic figure who led him to a state of internal rupture. This is what Jung described as the activation of the anima, the mysterious, unattainable archetypal woman who guides a man towards self-knowledge, but also drives him mad. He can't forget you because you weren't predictable or simple. You were a mirror, an abyss, and the sky, all at once. His ego still tries to understand how he lost you, and it's precisely why wounding his ego wisely gives birth to a love based not on control, but surrender. The man begins to realize he no longer holds power over the narrative. He's emotionally shaken, involved, vulnerable. The more he resists, the more entangled he becomes, because the love born after the ego's fall doesn't fade. It strengthens. He doesn't love you, despite the pain. He loves you because of it. The male ego is shaped to conquer, dominate, and feed on the certainty of having power over a woman's desire. But when that woman refuses to be predictable, when she escapes the patterns of emotional obedience he expects, something breaks inside him. Jung said every man projects his unconscious idealization onto a woman, expecting her to fulfill an imaginary role. When that projection finds no echo, he isn't just disappointed, he fragments. This fragmentation is the start of what can become a real bond. There is no desire without absence, no true love without pain. When a woman dares to shatter the illusion of the male ego, not with aggression but elegance, she forces him to confront his own wounds. This confrontation isn't rational. It occurs on a symbolic, archetypal plane. The man begins to see you as a figure transcending the mundane. You become an enigma, an open wound that bleeds slowly, one he refuses to heal because deep down, he doesn't want to heal. He wants to feel. A woman's most powerful weapon in this process is silence. Not passive, submissive silence, but silence charged with power. Jung taught that the unconscious expresses itself more through symbols than words, and silence is a brutal symbol. It represents absence, disinterest, finality, but also freedom. When you stay silent, he hears his own thoughts, and those thoughts are cruel. They tell him he wasn't enough, that he lost you, that he never truly knew you. In this confrontation, he starts desiring you with the force of someone who lost something they took for granted. The more you withdraw, the more he advances, not with arrogance, but fear. Fear is desire's greatest catalyst. When the ego is wounded, fear of being replaced, forgotten, or leaving no mark consumes him. Jung called this the return to the center of the self, a moment when, faced with emotional pain, the individual is forced to rediscover their essence. If you are responsible for this return, he'll never detach from your image. You become the turning point of his life, and everything afterward carries the bitter taste of comparison. In this state, he no longer seeks to merely win you back. He wants to restore his own worth in your eyes. But now, it's too late for vanity. The ego is broken, and what speaks now is instinct. The instinct to possess, to prove, to belong. The harder he tries to rise, the more he realizes the woman he desires is no longer the one he knew. She evolved, became conscious, stepped out of projection and into reality. And no matter how he fights, he's already too in love to retreat. There comes an inevitable moment in this journey when the man, though he won't admit it, starts wondering if he lost you forever. He doesn't understand how the woman who once sought answers, cared, and devoted herself now simply doesn't react. Carl Jung would say this represents the rupture of projection. He no longer sees you as an extension of his ego, but as something external, unattainable, something that won't submit. This is where love transforms into obsession, because anything that escapes the ego's dominion becomes fascination to the unconscious. He begins reliving memories, details, moments that once seemed insignificant. Your ignored smile, the unanswered message, the presence he underestimated. Now every past gesture becomes a symbol. Jung asserted that the unconscious builds bridges through repressed emotions, connecting him directly to you. You become a psychic presence even when distant. For a man accustomed to controlling everything, this is devastating. At this point, desire is no longer physical. It's psychological. He doesn't just want to touch you. He wants to be validated by you, to be seen again by the eyes that once admired him. But you're no longer in the same place. His wounded ego tries to rebuild the narrative, make excuses, seek reconnection. But the woman who knows her worth doesn't return out of lack. She returns only if she desires it. This destroys him because the ego can't handle female freedom. The ego wants security, routine, dominion, and you offer the exact opposite: choice. Carl Jung said when a woman awakens her deepest essence, she becomes a catalyst for a man's evolution. But this only happens when she stops trying to save him, allows him to face his own pain, and refuses to carry the weight of his emotional responsibility. By doing so, she forces him to grow or lose himself completely. Either way, she wins, because true love isn't born from dependency, but emotional maturity. The pain you caused his ego may paradoxically be the greatest gift he's ever received. Right now, he's torn between the pride that pushes him away and the desire that pulls him closer. He wants to seek you, but doesn't know how. He wants to approach, but fears rejection. He wants to return, but feels you're no longer available. This internal conflict, what Jung called the tension of opposites, creates a state of profound emotional confusion. The only possible escape is surrender. If he reaches that point, you'll have achieved the impossible. You broke his ego without destroying his essence. You walked away without severing the bond. You wounded him, but also healed him. When a man surrenders to this pain, something within him changes. Forever. Jung explained that psychic pain dismantles all the masks the ego built for protection. In this process, the man begins to see the woman not as someone to control or conquer, but as a mirror reflecting everything he tried to hide. He feels rage, confusion, nostalgia, but above all, need. Not to have you at any cost, but to reclaim what he lost within himself when you left. This is the crisis point for the male ego. And every crisis, according to Jung, is an opportunity for new consciousness. By breaking the dynamic of emotional dependency, you created space for him to connect with his vulnerability. This contact is transformative. The pain he feels isn't just from your absence, it's from the shame of wasting your presence. He relives every detail as if rewriting the past, but all he finds is the echo of his own emptiness. Most strikingly, to the unconscious, you've become the symbol of what he most desires and fears. You're no longer just a woman. You're the living embodiment of what Jung called the elevated anima, the feminine force that awakens the masculine to his soul. This consumes him because he starts to realize losing you wasn't just a mistake. It was a kind of death. The death of the illusion that you'd always be there. The death of control over your feelings. The death of an ego that believed itself untouchable. Meanwhile, you remain steadfast. It's this steadfastness that makes him regard you with new perception. No longer arrogance, but reverence. The woman who withdraws from begging for affection becomes inaccessible, not out of pride, but self-awareness. This is what the male ego can't handle. A woman who is self-sufficient. Jung said a soul that finds meaning within itself doesn't bow to external lack. You stopped being dependent to become your own center. To him, this is unbearable and irresistible. Now he begins rebuilding his identity based on what he lost. Paradoxically, this brings him closer to you, because now he doesn't just want to love, he wants to be worthy of love. The fractured ego starts making room for genuine feeling, not born from fear of losing you, but the desire to find you again, authentically, not as his ego idealized you. You planted the doubt that crumbled his emotional security, and that doubt became a portal to something he'd never known before. Depth. When the man finally acknowledges he lost the woman who confronted him silently yet devastatingly, he embarks on what Jung termed individuation, a solitary internal journey, where he must descend into the basements of his soul and face the monsters he created to protect his image. He remembers you, but now with a different gaze, not as someone who rejected him, but someone who stripped him bare. To a proud ego, this is a scar that never heals, a burning, pulsing guide. Meanwhile, the woman who triggered this process no longer waits or needs him to feel complete. This autonomy wounds him most deeply. Jung said the awakened feminine soul stops living to please the external world and dances to the rhythm of her own inner universe. Now, your mystery, yes, but also clarity. Clarity about what you accept, reject, and will never allow again. This clarity turns his pain into admiration. Absence becomes respect, and desire is now laced with guilt, nostalgia, and surrender. At this stage, the man lies in emotional ruins. Over this shattered ground, he begins reconstructing his perception of masculinity, no longer virile and domineering, but one that accepts feeling, erring, losing. Because you forced him out of his comfort zone, Jung taught that authentic love arises from the union of opposites, and that's exactly what you did. You united light and shadow within him, even without physical touch. The woman who wounds the ego consciously opens a space for a man's heart to be touched truly for the first time. His mind, tired of justifications, starts surrendering to what he feels, and this transforms him. He begins seeing the world anew because you made him understand that what's lost to pride can hurt more than what's lost to fate. He sees you in every woman who isn't you, compares, searches, tries to forget, and can't, because what you offered wasn't common affection. It was a mirror. In that mirror, he saw himself naked, childlike, unprepared. Now, all he wants is the chance to be seen by you again, but not knowing if he deserves it. This is where true love can be born, if you allow it. But beware, the love born after the ego's fall isn't romantic. It's visceral, raw, imperfect. The man who returns after being deconstructed doesn't come back whole. He returns in pieces, willing to become complete. He returns in silence, longing to listen. If you choose to look at him again, you'll see something new in his eyes: humility. This rare, real humility transforms wounded passion into rooted love. Now he no longer seeks you out of lack, but recognition. After so many internal falls, the man starts understanding that what he felt for you wasn't mere desire or attachment, it was transformation. Carl Jung explained that true love isn't about consolation, it's about exposure. And you exposed everything: his fear of inadequacy, the insecurity masked by arrogance, the pride that was always a disguise for fragility. So when he thinks of you, he doesn't just see a face or body, he sees who he became after you left. This is the ultimate proof that love isn't built on constant presence, but the absence that leaves marks. You didn't scream, beg, or chase. You simply left with dignity, consciousness, and a silence so deafening it became a call to the soul. Jung taught that true silence is a summons to the soul, and this call still echoes within him. He may smile at the world, but you linger in the thoughts he avoids at night, because the woman who forced him to descend into his own rubble will forever be the one he can't erase. Most strikingly, by wounding his ego, you liberated him. The pain you caused wasn't punishment, it was a portal. You pushed him into himself, into territory he'd never dared enter. There, he found questions only you could answer, but the choice is no longer his. Jung claimed emotional power shifts when consciousness awakens. And that's what happened. You became whole, while he's still trying to rebuild himself with the fragments left after you. Time doesn't heal now. It reveals. It reveals you weren't just any woman. It reveals your absence holds more power than the presence of all others. It reveals love doesn't happen when two people meet, but when two consciousnesses recognize each other. He may never find someone like you, not because you were perfect, but because you were the only one who dared challenge him where it hurt most, the core of his ego. When a woman touches that point with grace, she doesn't just leave a mark, she transforms. If he returns, and he likely will, he won't be the same man. He'll be someone more real, mature, available, but above all, someone who looks at you with the respect of one who was broken by you and thus rebuilt. Jung said every psychic wound holds a seed of revelation. You were his wound and his revelation. Now, with his ego shattered and heart exposed, he has one option left: to love you with the depth you've always deserved, or lose you with the pain of knowing he'll never find anything like you. There's a love born not from contact but absence, not from promises but the silent pain of losing someone who chose to leave out of self-love. This love, forged in the fire of ego's ashes, is the truest of all. Carl Jung said only what confronts us can liberate us. By breaking free from emotional submission, you became liberation. Not just for him, but yourself. You stopped being shaped by his desire to embody your own worth. What he feels now isn't ordinary guilt, it's reverence. Unknowingly, he was led to the soul's deepest place, where ego no longer sustains illusions, and the heart begins pleading for authenticity. You didn't win the game of love, you transcended it. Because to love isn't to annul oneself for another, it's to provoke in them the need to be better. You didn't need to scream to be heard. Your silence taught more than words. Your absence was the lesson fate needed to teach him. He may try to move on, but he'll never forget the woman who forced him to face himself with honesty, because there's no cure without a wound. You were that sacred wound, one that doesn't fade or heal quickly, but leaves eternal marks. Marks that no longer hurt but remind. The right woman isn't the one who adapts to the male ego, but the one who confronts it until he rebuilds himself into something truer, worthier, more human. If he learned anything from you, it's this: to love demands courage, surrender, and humility. You might not hear the words he wishes to say, but you'll see your absence reflected in his future gestures. Women like you don't pass by. They remain. You weren't a chapter. You were the turning point. While others strive to be remembered, you're simply impossible to forget, because you didn't fit into his world. You challenged it, and that changes everything. After all, the only woman who truly transforms a man is the one with the courage to leave the moment he believes he'll have her forever. So I leave you with a question. Do you seek to be loved, or to be remembered as unforgettable? If this message resonated with you, like this video, share it with women who need to hear it, and subscribe. Here you won't find common advice. You'll find consciousness, courage, and clarity. Together, let's awaken all the world tried to numb in you.